Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Kelly Victory, filling in for Dr. Drew today. Drew is tied up with some other obligations, and so I am driving the ship myself today. Thrilled to be joined with two really great guests. They will not be on together, but sequentially. Reggie Littlejohn, super excited. She is the co-founder of the Sovereignty Coalition and the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force. She's an expert really on what is going on with the WHO, and we're in this pending treaty. Looking forward to getting into the weeds on that so that I understand more really what's in that treaty and what it would mean for us. Looks to me on FOSS to be a sort of tyrannical power grab, but I'm hoping that Reggie's going to really fill us in on that. And then I've got Dr. William Makis, who's going to join us as well. He's a repeat guest and is going to really be talking about some of the terrifying data, frankly, with regard to cancers and increased cancer rates on the heels of this global vaccine rollout. And I was thinking just a little bit, by the way, I was happy to have Reggie for many, many reasons. One of them was to get away from talking just about COVID. And at the risk of, I don't want to be that person who's constantly running around like a bandy rooster talking about, the next Fear Fest. I've been very openly and vocal about this fear mongering that's gone on for the past 3.5 years. And I don't want to be that person who goes from COVID to the next Fear Fest. That said, I feel some element of obligation to bring focus to and to shed some light on some of the other things that are going on that are what I perceive to be real threats to our sovereignty, threats to our democracy. And I think that what is going on at the WHO and the UN is quite terrifying. So at the risk of being, again, a somebody who's perceived as talking about the sky falling once again, I think this is something we need to delve into. And then with Dr. Makis is going to talk about with regard to these cancer rates, again, I think it's something that we are obligated to be aware of and to talk about and decide really whether this is something that should cause us grave concern. So we're going to go to, start with our brief intro and a couple of ads. And then when I come back, I will be joined by Reggie Littlejohn.
Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for Christ's sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
These products have transformed my life and Susan's and saved our marriage. Discover the key to oral hygiene, regardless of your current daily dental routine. Whether you diligently brush and floss multiple times a day, or you struggle, you got bleeding gums, bad breath, plaque buildup, this revelation is for both of you. Surprisingly, over 350,000 Americans experience health issues that may be connected to their toothbrush or even caused by it, ranging from heart or blood sugar problems, forgetfulness, digestive difficulties, immune issues, all related to oral hygiene. Scientific studies have shown that a simple switch of your toothbrush can lead to a healthier teeth and potentially save your marriage. Yes, save your marriage. Our study, we did a personal study. My wife, Susan, hates the sound of the sonic toothbrushes, but introducing the Real White Sonic toothbrush, of course, also their hydroxyapatite dirty mouth mineral toothpaste by Primal Life Organics. These products have transformed my life and Susan's and saved our marriage. It's much quieter. It's a very powerful toothbrush, but it is quiet and it saved our marriage. So the Real White Sonic toothbrush from Primal Life Organics stands out among all other electric toothbrushes I've tried. It effectively eliminates plaque, harmful bacteria, promotes gum health. Get yours and enjoy 60% off at naturaltoothbrush.com/DREW.
All right, welcome back. I'm going to be joined now with Reggie Littlejohn, who I said previously. I knew of her actually from her work in women's rights. She's the president of Women's Rights Without Borders. She more recently has been a co-founder of the Sovereignty Coalition and the Stop Vaccine Passports task force. She is and incidentally also has a JD from a law degree from Yale University. She's an expert clearly at what's going on with the World Health Organization and the UN. And I really want to as I said, get into the weeds a little bit on the details of what is it that the World Health Organization is trying to do with this treaty. What does the treaty actually say? What would the implications be? What is the U.S. doing or not doing in response to this pending treaty and those sorts of things? So let's bring on Reggie Littlejohn to join me. Reggie. Thank you for being here. As I said, I knew of you based on your work really on women's issues and abortion issues and things of that sort long before the COVID debacle came down the pike. Now you are the person who I would look to really for the details on what is going on with the World Health Organization. I have never been a fan of the WHO, and these last 3.5 years have validated that concern. But before we even get truly into the sort of the ramifications or implications of this treaty, take a few minutes and give us a primer. What is the treaty, the WHO treaty? We've had other people on, Dr. Kat Lindley in the past, to talk a little bit about it, but take a few minutes and actually explain what is it that's on the table, and then we'll talk about what it might mean for us and the rest of the world.
Well, I'm happy to do that. And also, just to clarify, when we talk about women's rights without frontiers, I founded that to stop forced abortion in China. So that's and it's because of my work watching coercive population control and the way that China, the totalitarian regime in China, the way it's coming all over the world now through the WHO and the United Nations. So it's my background in Chinese human rights that has enabled me to see how the China model is being exported worldwide through the World Health Organization and the United Nations, and also other globalist organizations. So with respect to the pandemic treaty and the international health regulations, there are two documents that are being negotiated right now at the World Health Organization. One is amendments to the international health regulations. The other one is a pandemic treaty. They work together to create what I believe is a totalitarian, globalist, medical police state, basically. So the international health regulations, what they want to do is they want to do things like delete the words non-binding, to turn the World Health Organization from an advisory body into a body that has the power of coercion. And then when you combine that with the pandemic treaty, but first of all, I should just say, the World Health Organization does not call this a treaty. It calls it a framework, a convention. It calls it anything but a treaty because it doesn't want it to have to go through the U.S. Senate and the other legislative bodies for ratification. The way that ratification works within the World Health Assembly is every country gets one vote. So the United States gets a vote, one vote, same as the smallest country in the world gets one vote. And if it passes, in the case of a treaty, it would have to be 75%, 3/4 pass rate, I believe. So in any case, or it might be 66%, but in any case, it's a super majority. So the point is, they don't want to call it a treaty because they don't want it to have to go through a second kind of ratification. But what it will do is it will interfere with the doctor-patient relationship. The World Health Organization wants the power to say what medications you can and cannot have, and also what medications you must have. They want the power to force vaccination. They want the power to enable, basically to tell the United States if we have a pandemic or any kind of a health event in the United States. They want the power to tell us that we have to have mask mandates, vaccine mandates, lockdowns, whatever it is, they will call the shots. And that's why we founded the Sovereignty Coalition, because this will absolutely destroy U.S. sovereignty and the sovereignty of any country in the world. If you have an organization, a globalist organization outside of your country telling you what you have to do, then you're no longer a sovereign nation. You're no longer making your sovereign decisions over healthcare. Not only that, but in order to, let's say that they decide in the next pandemic that everybody needs to be vaccinated, they can use that as a pretext to force basically a surveillance. So what they will do with this surveillance is they want to have basically vaccine passports. Although the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force, I think, did a lot to make that nomenclature basically toxic or radioactive. So now they call it a digital ID, but it doesn't matter what you call it. It could be called a smart health card, digital ID, Excelsior Pass, whatever it is. If it's a mandatory digital ID, it can give rise to the China social credit system. And that's actually how I came into this issue, because of my work in China. I saw that the vaccine passport would support the platform that they have in China, which is that they surveil everything about you, like, okay, facial recognition, real-time geolocation. They know what you look like. They know where you are. All your social media posts, your internet search history, your internet spending history, all of that. And they come up with a number about how compliant of a citizen that you are. Do you never make any waves? And so if you do make waves, your social credit score will go down, and then they can do things like you can lose your job. Ultimately, what they can do is they can cut you off from your finances. And if you think that this can't happen in the West, it actually happened to the Canadian truckers when they had their demonstration against vaccine mandates. The Canadian government with the banks off.
So let's stop there. A lot to unpack there. First of all, if this is predicated on or based on whether or not you make waves, my social credit scores are going to be in the gutter. I'm in a heap of trouble. But you said a lot there. First of all, I have from the very beginning said, and I've said many times on this show, in my opinion, the WHO is the long arm of the Chinese Communist Party. They are one in the same. Fundamentally, they are one and the same. Dr. Tedros, who is not actually a medical doctor who runs the WHO, is a bad actor on his own. He's been involved with some really heinous crimes around the world. But if we talk about really what this would mean, you made a really critical point that I hope is not lost on people. Right now, the WHO is not a regulatory authoritarian body. They don't make legislation. They don't have any control. They're supposed to be, remember, like the CDC is in this country. But what we saw happen during this pandemic was that the CDC took on powers that it doesn't actually have. All of a sudden, they were calling the shots, and half of America, more than half probably, believes that the CDC actually is a regulatory body, that they actually have that power that they were wielding, and they don't. So now, if this treaty were to pass, or whatever we're going to call it, we're not going to call it a treaty, agreement, would the WHO... Yeah, okay, so we
should, because that's what it is.
Yeah, okay, so if this treaty were to pass, would the WHO then be, christened with some new actual authority, or is it just we're abdicating this authority to them because they said so?
So what you're getting at is a really important point, which is the WHO actually, they're an unelected, unaccountable body with no formal power unless we give it to them. So somebody who didn't give it to them was President Trump. He withdrew from the WHO. If we had a president who would stand up against them, they would have no power. Right now, we do not have a president that will stand up against them, but actually is behind what they're doing. And that's why we're so vulnerable, because the protections that we should have are not working. And
interesting. So, go ahead. Keep going. Sorry. I was going to say, go ahead. Sorry.
what I wanted to say is, in the treaty, okay, they have something called One Health, and maybe
Right.
we can just put up that One Health chart. So that's the next one. That's the World Economic Forum. The first chart is One Health. Yeah. So you can see in the One Health chart that what they want to do is they want to take jurisdiction over human health, animal health, and the environment, basically every aspect of life on Earth. And so if there's a health threat or even a potential health threat, they can step in. What they want to be able to do is just step in and just take over and tell us how to handle it. So so this is very, very dangerous. And then not only do they want to surveil us in terms of our vaccination status, but or any other medical status, they want to surveil us in terms of our social media posts, and because they want to be able to basically have a global ministry of truth where they're trying to stop quote unquote misinformation and disinformation from spreading. And so what they're asking nations to do is to actively surveil people's social media to make sure that they don't post things that are counter narrative to the WHO. Whereas perhaps the greatest purveyor of misinformation and disinformation about the origins of the COVID virus, and also whether or not the vaccines were safe and effective, 100% safe, 100% effective is what they were saying in the beginning. That, in my opinion, is misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah, and I got to say, Reggie, one of the things that jumps out to me, and I think is perhaps not readily apparent to people who aren't in public health or aren't in healthcare, is when you talk about if there, a global emergency or a global crisis or a global threat. That's in the eye of the beholder. Those things are very loosely defined. Who determines if something's, I don't know about you. I don't happen to, I'm afraid of a lot of things right now. Climate change isn't one of them. So to me, that is not a crisis or a threat. Who's the determiner of these? Who gets to decide? Who's the decider, in the words of George Bush, whether or not something is actually a crisis?
Okay, he has a name. His name is Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus. It's the Director General of the WHO that gets to decide what constitutes a crisis or a potential crisis. And you're absolutely right. It could be a health-related thing, or it could be depression, or it could be climate change, or it could be gun violence. It's whatever he decides is a health threat. And then they get to move in and tell us how to handle it. So
And that
I just also go
As you
ahead.
say, that we have seen that happening in the United States, as you well know. It's you simply announce that something is a public health crisis. First, it was COVID, then it was climate change, and then you use that announcement that something is a public health crisis in order to eliminate people's civil liberties. Or you announce that gun violence is a crisis, and we can now suspend the Second Amendment, if you're the governor of certain states, or you think that you can. So this idea of martial law as public health policy, or the idea that we determine that something's a public health crisis, whatever the heck it is, and then you can, that part of this treaty I find extraordinarily concerning, because they just decide if Tedros Ghebreyesus, who, as I said, not actually a medical doctor and has a very sordid background, if he decides something's a crisis, then all of a sudden the treaty takes effect, correct?
Correct. And just as all of these different things that you named, gun violence or whatever else, could serve as a pretext for the suspension of civil liberties. The threat of some kind of a health crisis serves as a pretext for this digital ID, which is supposed to help us with our health. But I'd like to put on that second chart about everything that the World Economic Forum wants us to have the digital ID in order to do, because this digital ID is going to be used to totally control our lives. So if you look at this chart, this is right from the World Economic Forum, and you will see that you need a digital ID to access insurance and medical treatment, to open bank accounts and carry out financial transactions, to travel, to access humanitarian aid. So if you have a tsunami or a fire in your area, you're going to have a digital ID to get any kind of humanitarian aid, to shop online, to use social media, to vote, to file your taxes, to collect government benefits, in other words, Social Security and Medicare, to own cell phones and computers. So basically, they're calling this, a digital ID, and oh yes, this is just to make sure that everybody's safe, and that everybody's vaccinated, and to check your health status and all that. No, they want to control your entire life through these digital IDs. And the World Health Organization has already connected with the European Union to spread this kind of a digital ID all over the world.
It's terrifying to me. And so I want to, at this point, it's my understanding that this is one of those you have to opt out kind of things. That my understanding is that the treaty's on the table, and unless you as a country, a member nation of the WHO, unless you stand up and say, no, we have concerns, we don't want to do that, then you are otherwise you're automatically opted in or considered to be on board with this unless you voice that there's a requirement for you to opt out. And the countries, by the way, I think there are 11 countries to date that have voiced concerns, and they're countries like Syria and Iran and Cuba and Belarus. You know who's not on that list? Who hasn't spoken up? The United States. Okay, so there's sort of a tacit agreement that our current administration is on board with this, or am I misinterpreting that?
No, I don't think you're misinterpreting it at all. And I think it's more than tacit, because it was our administration that really sort of launched the effort to have these amendments to the international health regulations. And, our administration has over and over again voiced support for all of this. So in terms of President Trump withdrew us from the WHO, President Biden is not going to do that. Okay, so the best that we can hope for is to defund it. And the Sovereignty Coalition and the people who've been backing the Sovereignty Coalition have had a major victory lately. So earlier this year, before we even founded the Sovereignty Coalition, there was a bill or two in Congress to defund or withdraw from the WHO, but it wasn't getting any traction. We ran a campaign and had, several 100,000 emails sent to members of Congress. 6 weeks later, 18 members of Congress got together on the Hill and said, we need to defund and we need to withdraw from the WHO. So that was a huge victory there. Then a couple of those people who stood up, turns out that they were on a subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee. And that subcommittee passed a bill saying that the WHO should be defunded. So we said, oh, that's amazing. But then the appropriations of the vote of the entire Appropriations Committee was coming up very shortly. So the night before that vote came up, we did another campaign, and people got out and emailed and called people, and every member of the Appropriations Committee had 5,500 emails in their inbox overnight saying defund the WHO. The Appropriations Committee defunded the WHO. And then just recently in these negotiations, we've learned that that is the recommendation of the entire Congress. The House of Representatives has recommended defunding the WHO. That would not have happened, I don't believe, without our efforts and the efforts of all the people who got behind us and made their voices heard to Congress that we need to defund the WHO. Now, it still needs to pass through the Senate. It still needs to be signed by President Biden. But we never would have dreamed we would have gotten this far 8 or 9 months ago.
No, that is spectacular work, because I can tell you, as a citizen, I look at that list of things that you're talking about that a digital ID would control, and you can explain away one thing or say, yeah, I'm not worried if they've, vaccine mandates, or I'm not worried about them limiting my, checking account. I'll find a way around it, or I'm not worried. But when you put all of those things together and say you would be controlled, it would be fundamentally impossible to survive in that world without participating. There wouldn't be a workaround in my mind. You wouldn't be able to opt out of the digital ID. I can't see how you could do it. It looks terrifying to me.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's why we call it the digital gulag. So
Yeah.
the two parts of it are the digital ID and the central bank digital currency, because the way that they enforce this digital ID is by shutting off your money. And if you have a central bank digital currency and no cash, then you are truly trapped in the digital gulag. And
Right.
that's why we have to stand up now while we still can.
Reggie, help me understand. The clock's winding down, but help me understand, what is the relationship between the WHO's their portion of this and the UN's? How do these? I'm naive. How, fill me in?
No problem. Okay, so I like that last chart up, the UN chart. There's a new UN chart about global disasters. So the WHO is the health arm of the United Nations, and they want to take over the world, establish a global government through health. But the United Nations also doesn't want to be left out, and they have submitted a policy brief that says that they want a global emergency platform that will operationalize automatically in the case of certain events. Okay, emergency platform, and these are the events. So you can see here a major climactic event, also a pandemic risk. They would do that through the WHO. Cyberspace disruption, a disruption in the global internet. So the UN can take over the way that the WHO wants to take over. A major event in outer space, believe it or not, or an unforeseen black swan event, which would include anything else. So basically, it's like the United Nations and the World Health Organization together, between the two of them and in tandem, want to establish a one world government. One is through the World Health Organization, and the other one is through one is through health, and the other one is through climate change and anything else. So between the two of them, they are determined to, I believe, rob us of our national sovereignty and our personal medical freedom and all of our other freedoms. So
Yeah.
I would urge people. Go ahead.
I would say what it feels like, Reggie, is that the UN component is sort of, in case we left anything out of the WHO piece that we want to control, we're the mop. Everything else is, falls under this umbrella. So if we left anything out that we want to control about you from the WHO, fear not, it's controlled under this UN plan. So that it really feels like a tyrannical global power grab that would absolutely change, really forever, the face of the globe. I mean, sovereignty is exactly the word. We would absolutely abdicate our sovereignty, our control over our constitution, all of our rights, and even the concept of being a sovereign nation would go away if this were to happen.
That's right. What they want, Klaus Schwab recently said something along the lines of, we don't want nation states, we want stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? The stakeholders are basically the members of the World Economic Forum. They want one world. They don't want separate nations. And they're using the like you talked about, the sort of the fear porn to get people to give up their rights. It's like, oh, I don't care, if I'm an American, I'm a global citizen, and help me because I'm worried that I'm going to die. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to intimidate us all and terrify us all into giving up our rights. And we have to stand up and just say no. So I would urge people to go to the Sovereignty Coalition, sovereigntycoalition.org, and take action there. I would urge people to go to the Stop Vaccine Passports Task Force. We have the best set of webinars in the world on these subjects. And I would urge people to follow me on Getter. I'm at Reggie Littlejohn, at Real Reggie Littlejohn on Getter. And I post constant updates.
That's awesome. And you're also on Twitter, correct? At Reggie Little JHN, or not so much? No, mostly Getter?
I was kicked off of Twitter in a weird
way. Good for you.
No, for saying that there should not be mandatory vaccines of 6-month-old babies for COVID, and they haven't let me back on. You can see me, but I cannot post on that account. But I'm on Twitter a little bit little account. It's called @endgendercide, @endgendercide, but it's just tiny. It's like, it's a tiny account.
Say again what, so we can get it up there with the Sovereignty Coalition, because that's really, I think, what people need to be addressing. We need all hands on deck here. This is critical. This is no longer sort of a theoretical risk. This is not an existential threat. This is the real thing. And I'd love your take, by the way. What is the likelihood? I mean, where do you sit on this, Reggie? What is the likelihood that they can get this thing to pass, or that this digital ID can actually come to fruition during our lifetime?
100%. Okay, because it's one country, one vote. It's going to pass, and I say that because I don't want people to be crestfallen when it passes. It doesn't mean that we're doomed, because we can still defund them. We can still elect an administration that will withdraw from them. We can still save ourselves, but please, to the listeners, don't expect somebody else to come and save you. You have to be a part of this movement. I mean, if you don't take action now, don't think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week, I'll do it next year, I'm busy, whatever.
Yeah.
If we don't stand up for this now, and this digital gulag snaps shut, there will be no more dissent, because as soon as you try to dissent, like you and me, Dr. Kelly, immediately, we'll get shut off from our money, and who knows whatever else, if this all goes through, and they will just silence us, and they will paralyze us.
I'll tell you, if this isn't terrifying, I don't know what is. I had zero fear for a quote novel virus, not a bit. But this to me is really terrifying, and I do hope that people pay heed and take action, not only to educate themselves, but to really support this and to make sure that we get this thing defunded, or we are looking at a whole. Talk about a brave new world. It's not going anywhere good. Listen, thank you so much. I hope that you will come back. We need constant updates. We need regular updates on where we are on this, what you see coming down, what people can be doing or should be doing. But we need regular updates. This is happening in real time. I know the UN just met. That meeting was September 20th. The United States has not gotten where they need to be compared, as I said, to other nations like Syria, Iran, and Cuba. That have all managed to speak up against this. So hopefully we will make some headway. But please promise us you will come back and join us again.
Oh, I would love to. It would be my honor and my pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break here, as I said, folks, and we're going to come back with Dr. William Makis after the break.
I think everyone knows the next medical crisis could be just around the corner, whether it comes in the form of another pandemic or something much more routine like a tick bite. You and your family need to be prepared. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. You know the Wellness Company. We have their physicians on, like Dr. McCullough, frequently. The Wellness Company and their doctors are medical professionals you can trust. And their new medical emergency kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy.
It's a safety net. It's an insurance policy
absolutely.
That you hope you're not going to
100%.
need, but if you need it, you sure as heck are going to wish you had it if you need it.
Be ready for anything. This medical emergency kit contains an assortment of life-saving medications, including ivermectin, Z-Pak. The medical emergency kit provides a guidebook to aid in the safe use of all these life-saving medications. From anthrax to tick bites to COVID-19, the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit is exactly what you need to have on hand to be prepared. Rest assured, knowing that you have emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and antiparasitics on hand to help you and your family stay safe from whatever life throws at you next. Go to drdrew.com/TWC. That is DRDREW.com/TWC to get 10% off today. Just click on that link. Fall is right around the corner, which means dry, flaky red skin from allergy season is coming with it. But the best way to take care of your skin is with our skincare secret, Genucel. You don't need to worry about that puffy, tired eye look or those annoying dark spots or even dry, flaky skin, because Genucel Skincare has you covered. Susan and I love our Genucel products so much, we want you to try our personally curated skincare bundles.
It's risk-free at Genucel.com/Drew. Genucel works so well, you can see the results in this unplanned live moment on our show when the Redness Repair Cream repaired my skin in just minutes right before your eyes. Their concentrated vitamin C serum helps keep your skin plump and hydrated. Plus, with their immediate effects, you can see astonishing results in under 12 hours. Quick, effective, and easy. Go to Genucel.com/Drew right now to try our bundles and save over 60% today. And remember to enroll in Genucel's world-class concierge program for additional savings and free shipping. Don't wait. It's Genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. There are three reasons the central banks are dumping the U.S. dollar: inflation, deficit spending, and our insurmountable national debt. The fact is, there is one asset that has withstood famine, wars, political and economic upheaval dating back to biblical times: gold. And you can own it in a tax-sheltered retirement account with the help of Birch Gold. That's right, Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k, maybe from a previous employer, into an IRA in gold. And the best part, you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just visit birchgold.com/Drew for your free info kit. They'll hold your hand through the entire process. Think about this. When currencies fail, gold is a safe haven. How much more time does the dollar have? Birch Gold has an A+ rating with Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. I do not give financial advice, and previous performance is no guarantee of future performance. Visit birchgold.com/Drew to get your free info kit on gold. That is BIRCHGOLD.com/DREW. Some platforms have banned the discussion of controversial topics. If this episode ends here, the rest of the show is available at drdrew.tv.
There's nothing in medicine that doesn't boil down to a risk-benefit calculation. It is the mandate of public health to consider the impact of any particular mitigation scheme on the entire population. This is uncharted territory, Drew.
And Dr. Makis, welcome back as well. We're thrilled. It's been some months since you've been here. Really happy to see you again. Unfortunately, I hate what we're going to be talking about, but thrilled that you're here. I gave you an improper introduction, or inadequate, I should say. You are a physician based in Canada. You're an expert in radiology, oncology, and immunology, and you've been someone who I've relied upon, along with others, with regard to evaluation specifically of the cancer rates and cancers that we're seeing on the heels of these mRNA vaccines. And I didn't mention, by the way, you just joined the wellness company, so congrats on that. Many of our good friends of the show are associated with the wellness company, so happy about that. But let's start with, I had predicted, unfortunately, and I hate that I am right, I'd predicted before the vaccines were ever launched to the public that they would have a profound impact on the immune system, and as a result of that alone, would likely cause increased cancer rates, just because of their immunological impact. So let's start, if you would, just by talking a little bit about what you are seeing in the data, in the numbers, with regard to cancers, what kinds of cancers, those sorts of things. And then maybe we'll get into the weeds, you and I, about the perhaps some of the pathology of that, why that might be, some theories for why we're seeing these numbers.
You know, Dr. Kelly, I've been tracking these turbo cancers, as they're being called, these very aggressive cancers that are showing up in young COVID vaccinated people. The youngest case I've reported is a 12-year-old boy who had a Moderna vaccine and came down with end-stage brain cancer that killed him in less than a year. I'm seeing it in teenagers, in university and college students who are mandated to take COVID vaccines. People in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s are coming down with stage 4 cancers. These cancers are presenting at a late stage 3, but usually stage 4. These are lymphomas, leukemias. These are breast cancers, colon cancers, lung cancers, hepatobiliary cancers, testicular cancers in young men, ovarian cancers in women, kidney cancers, renal cell cancers, melanomas, skin cancers, and sarcomas as well. So these are the types of cancers that are showing up in a younger cohort than oncologists expect. They're showing up at a late stage. The tumors can grow very large. So some of these tumors are described as football-sized, even watermelon-sized. These are 10, 15 centimeter tumors. And they're very aggressive, and they spread very rapidly. So even when the surgeons are trying to get at them, trying to surgically excise them so that they could control the tumor, what they usually find after surgery is that the tumor has already spread. It's already spread to the lymph nodes. It's already spread to the lungs or the bones. Very aggressive cancers, and really related to the COVID-19 vaccine specifically, and mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines.
Well, one of the things, let me just step back for a second, because one of the things that might not be known to our audience is that all cancers are not created equal with regard to the population that they hit. For example, we not uncommonly and tragically see certain blood cancers in children, leukemias, for example. It wouldn't be uncommon to see a brain tumor, brain cancers sometimes in young children. It would be extraordinarily uncommon to see a colon cancer in somebody before the fourth or fifth decade. Very uncommon to see a lung cancer before the fourth or fifth decade. Those sorts of things, extremely uncommon to see. So some of these cancers that we are seeing, and I think you're getting at that, things like these colon cancers, we are now seeing colon cancers in people in their late teens, 20s, and 30s. And again, as you said, very aggressive colon cancers. So it's not just that cancers per se, but it's seeing cancers in groups of people in whom I'd never seen a colon cancer in somebody under the age of 45 in my life until these COVID vaccines. So let's, in terms of, just to put some magnitude on it, in terms of, give us some sense of the magnitude versus what we would have considered to be the baseline numbers for cancer rates.
It's very hard to get a sense of this because it's almost impossible to get good cancer data from the governments. Ed Dowd has talked about this, the difficulty of getting good data. I've tried to get cancer data here in Canada from Statistics Canada, from the Canadian Cancer Society, and they are not reporting any data from 2021 or 2022. It seems they're holding this data back. And so I'm left with anecdotal evidence. And when Ed Dowd, he'll report from US insurance data that disability rates in the working population, let's say ages 18 to 64, who abided by the COVID vaccine mandates, disability rates are 500% higher compared to the working population who dropped out of the workforce and didn't want to get the vaccines. Well, a big portion of those disabilities are these cancers, are these cancer diagnoses. And so, I'm seeing an explosion of these cancers. I'm seeing it in doctors. I'm seeing it in nurses. I'm seeing it in other vaccine mandated professions. So all types of healthcare workers. I'm seeing it in teachers. I'm seeing it in police officers, firefighters, the military. You see it in flight attendants, for example. You had these airlines that wanted to have 100% vaccinated workforce. So really anywhere where there were very strict COVID vaccine mandates, that's where I'm seeing these explosions of these very aggressive cancers. And I can tell you, this year, 2023, seems to be much worse. There's many more cases of these turbo cancers than in 2022 or 2021. The trend is upwards. The numbers are on the rise. You can see this on websites like GoFundMe. If you go on GoFundMe and you put stage 4 cancer, and you can pick whatever cancer you want. You could put, breast cancer, you could put lung cancer, colon cancer. Not only are you seeing the shocking ages, young ages of these individuals who are reporting their cancers and their fundraising because, they lose their jobs when they're undergoing chemotherapy, for example. But you see just how many people are suffering, are coming down from these cancers, especially in 2023. It's just unbelievable. It's a tsunami of cancer diagnoses.
Before I get into the pathophysiology or some theories about why this is happening, can you classify if I said to you, what are the top 3 types of cancers that you're seeing? What would you say? What are the top types of cancers?
The top three I can tell you that seem to come up over and over are lymphoma, brain
Mm-hmm.
cancer, and really the most aggressive ones, the glioblastomas, and breast
Mm-hmm.
cancer. These seem to be the
Interesting.
top. If you want to round out, the top five, top six, you got to put in colon cancer.
Mhm.
You have to put in lung cancer, testicular cancer, and the leukemias are extremely aggressive. These leukemias, when they're being diagnosed, they are killing the individual in a matter of weeks, days, or even hours after diagnosis. They are that aggressive.
Yeah, and speaking of aggressiveness, not only what the data would show that I've seen is that it's not only new cancers, but the other thing is people who had cancers that had been deemed to be in remission, many times for over a decade. People who'd had breast cancer were considered a cure, or they'd had resected colon cancers years ago. And all of a sudden, not only is the cancer back, but it is back, as you said, with an aggressiveness that we have never seen. In other words, they're not only growing quickly but resistant to traditional therapies, chemotherapies, whatever. They just aren't responding in the way that we've seen before. So, do you agree that we're seeing resurgence of previously cancers that had been previously in remission?
Absolutely. And again, when the medical authorities tried to explain this away by saying, well, we missed a whole bunch of screenings, and people had their cancer appointments canceled for several months, and that's why we're seeing this surge of cancers. It does not explain the behavior of these cancers, and that is really the key: is that these cancers are behaving completely differently. You have recurrences of people who were in remission, and these recurrences are extremely aggressive. You have the presentation at stage 4 in very young groups, which is highly unusual. They grow very, very rapidly. They spread rapidly, and they're also resistant to conventional treatments. So these turbo cancers seem to be highly resistant to conventional chemotherapy regimens and conventional radiation therapy regimens, or even immunotherapy regimens. You will see this in testimonials of people on their GoFundMe pages. They will say, I found out my chemo didn't work. I found out, the radiation therapy
Right.
didn't work, and the cancer just kept growing throughout treatment. So this is not explained by missed screenings or missed appointments. We are dealing with a new phenomenon, and a phenomenon where these cancers are behaving completely differently, unlike anything we've seen, unlike anything I've seen in my career. And I've diagnosed tens of thousands of cancer patients in my career, and I have simply not seen this kind of behavior before. So this is not something we can just explain away by some missed screenings and missed appointments.
First of all, I 100% agree with you. This is a direct result of the vaccines. I find it ironic, however, that the authorities are saying, no, it's not because of the vaccines. It's because of one of the other things we did to screw people up, the lockdown. Okay. In other words, they're willing to say, no, it's not the vaccines. It's because everybody missed their screening appointments because of the other really stupid thing we did called a lockdown, and causing people to not get their routine screenings for breast cancer and colon cancer and skin cancer. It's just ironic that they don't see, any way you cut it, it's the responsibility of this grossly failed pandemic response. But let's talk a little bit about, I have 3 kind of buckets that I would say that here are the 3 things that I think could be or likely are contributing to the cancer thing. For me, it's number 1, the impact on the immune system overall. And we could talk about the specifics of that, just the suppression of the immune system, which is critical to fighting cancer. Secondly, the toxicity of perhaps the spike proteins themselves. And thirdly would be the more the wild card, the issue of the lipid nanoparticles, them being carcinogenic or teratogenic by themselves. So let's talk about each of those. And you start whichever one of those 3, the immune system overall, lipid nanoparticles, and spike proteins. And what component do you think might really be causing this?
I would actually sneak in a 4th category, and this 4th category would be DNA contamination of the Pfizer and
Okay,
Moderna vials
good. Yes.
recently,
Yes.
because that's actually not supposed to be a component of the vaccine. This is a contaminant left over from the manufacturing process. So I would put that as another category. potentially contributing to this surge of turbo cancers. But we can start with the damage to the immune system. I've seen this damage to the immune system back in 2021 when we had the first publications on negative vaccine efficacy, and you started seeing the double vaccinated after a number of months, let's say 6 months. They were getting infected with COVID-19 at higher rates, sometimes double, sometimes triple the rate of an unvaccinated person. And they started filling the hospitals, and they started filling the intensive care units and dying. And you could tell that from the data, from the government data, that there was severe immune system damage being inflicted on the double vaccinated. And then the triple vaccinated took over, and they started filling up the hospitals. And then in Australia, the quadruple vaccinated were filling up the hospitals and were dying at record rates. And the Canadian and Australian governments responded by deleting all vaccine status data of people in the hospitals. So we didn't know at some point who was dying, but it was the vaccinated who were making up 90% of the hospitalizations and deaths. So we already had evidence that the immune systems were being damaged in thousands of vaccinated people. And from the Cleveland Clinic study, we know that the more vaccine doses you take, the more damage your immune system takes on.
Right.
And so the more likely you are to get infected. But the problem with having a damaged immune system, and we can get into the sort of the complicated details of that, but when you have a damaged immune system, you have damaged cancer surveillance. That's sort of the bottom line, is
Yes.
that your T cells and your immune cells are constantly surveying your body for cancerous cells and mutated cells and destroying them, getting rid of them. If you have severe immune system damage that these mRNA vaccines seem to be causing, you lose that protection, you lose your immune system surveillance. And in some people, this seems to really be a very severe problem, and it makes them predisposed to getting these very aggressive cancers.
One of the things that I thought was very compelling was some studies that showed that there was a specific shift in the vaccinated to one of the immunoglobulins, IgG4. And IgG4 is supposed to be represented in relatively small amounts. It's the immunoglobulin that, in layman's terms, tells you to ignore something that is foreign. It's not in our best interest to constantly react to every foreign thing we come in contact with, because otherwise we'd be sneezing, sniffling, weepy messes every time we came across pollen or dust or whatever it is. So IgG4's job is to say, just ignore that. It's not self. It's a foreign entity, but ignore it because it's not important. If you have a huge uptick, which is what we seem to be seeing in IgG4 levels in the multiply vaccinated individuals, what they're telling the immune system's telling the body, ignore something that you shouldn't ignore, like an abnormal colon cell or an abnormal skin cell or, a cancerous cell. So I fear that they are getting the message to ignore things that are actually very dangerous. And I think that in addition to all the T cells, as you said, we know that people who've gotten gobs of these vaccines are at much higher risk for COVID, but it appears that they are much higher risk for other things that their immune system should be fighting off, like cancers. So I think that the IG shift, if you will, may be a contributor to that as well. So
we
keep going from there.
Yeah, we actually published on this. This IgG4 shift is what it's called, and what's fascinating about this was discovered a few months ago. So it's been less than a year that this was discovered. And what's interesting is you start to see the body producing this IgG4 antibody after you've had 2 shots, and it's specific to the mRNA vaccines. I want to stress that it's the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines where you see this IgG4 shift. You're not seeing it with the AstraZeneca or the J&J. Okay. And so once you've had 2 shots, the body starts to produce this tolerant antibody to the spike protein. Mm-hmm. But if you've had your 3rd shot, your booster shot, those levels go up 500 times. So you get a 500-fold increase just between COVID vaccine number 2 to COVID vaccine number 3. And then you start producing large amounts of this tolerant antibody to the spike protein. And this antibody, this IgG4 antibody, seems to completely mess up cancer surveillance in that it interferes with the other antibodies that are involved in cancer surveillance, like IgG1 and 3. And it seems to almost hide the cancer cells from the immune system by saying, look, like you said, this is not a problem, don't worry about it, because it's trying to create a tolerance for the spike protein, but now you've created tolerance to cancer cells as well, as an unintended consequence. And
Yeah.
so this is a big area of research right now, and it seems that the more COVID vaccines you take, the more you increase your levels of IgG4 and the more you damage your cancer surveillance. So this is a very serious issue in terms of damaging the immune system.
Has there been enough study, William, to tell whether that starts to tail off after a while? Are you seeing, there's an uptick, but are you seeing any decrease, or does it just seem to be going on in perpetuity?
Well, I can tell you from data that I've seen in the double vaccinated, and when we were still getting data from the Canadian government and the Australian government, when the quadruple vaccinated were filling the hospitals and then the triple vaccinated, the double vaccinated were doing much better. And the double vaccinated had stopped taking the COVID vaccines, and they were at least a year and a half from their last dose, and they seemed to be having immune system recovery. So they were getting infected at a much lower rate than the triple and quadruple vaccinated. It wasn't back to baseline. It wasn't as good as the unvaccinated, but they did have recovery. And this is what I've been trying to stress, is that people have to stop taking these shots. They have to stop taking these mRNA shots, and you have to give your body a chance to recover, but it's a slow process. So you need at least a year and a half for your body to start, your immune system to start recovering from this damage. And for that, you have to stop taking the shots, because the moment you take another shot, you've exposed your body to the antigen all over again, and you're back to square one in terms of the immune damage.
So then take the next, that's a very brief, touching on the immune component that may be contributing to these cancers. And it seems very clear to me, not difficult even for a layperson, I think, to understand that. So you brought up a very important fourth bucket that I had not included in there. I think you're right. This DNA contamination. We talked with Joshua Getsko and about the kind of what we call bait and switch, and the fact that the process, if you will, that they ended up using and launching to the public to create these vaccines ended up putting a lot of DNA or leaving DNA contamination in there. Talk about that and how that might be contributing to the cancer increase.
It all links together. When you had your guest talk about how the vaccines that were made for the clinical trials for Pfizer and Moderna were different from the vaccines that were released to the public, which were mass produced. And this mass production, which is done through DNA plasmids, these rings of DNA that they put into E. coli, and then they grow E. coli into very large numbers, and they extract these DNA plasmids. Now, these DNA plasmids have the spike protein sequence in them. And then they use these DNA plasmids to create the mRNA. And of course, they modify the mRNA with the pseudouridine, which again is involved in immune suppression through toll-like receptors. But what they were supposed to get rid of this DNA, these DNA plasmids, this contaminants, and they didn't. And so Kevin McKernan, US geneticist, has found large concentrations of DNA contamination in both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Now, he has found not just the DNA rings, but he has found fragments of DNA from these rings, all different kinds of sizes. The danger with this type of contamination, and it's a large amount of contamination, up to 30% of the genetic code in a vaccine vial can be this DNA contamination. The problem with that is that it is very easy for foreign DNA to integrate into our genome. And if it's integrating into the wrong place, let's say it integrates into a tumor suppressor gene area, now you've knocked off a very important tumor suppressor gene that protects you from cancer. Now you've astronomically increased your risk of getting cancer. And so this is a very serious concern. It's been confirmed in labs around the world. It's been confirmed in Germany. It's been confirmed in Japan. Professor Philip Buchholz just testified in the South Carolina Senate hearings about this. He's a cancer geneticist with a big lab. He's confirmed this finding in all the vials of Pfizer and Moderna. So this contamination is a very serious problem on its own. It increases cancer risk theoretically. And so we would need more studies to find out, if there's been integration events in people who've taken these vaccines, and then if those integration events are causing cancer. Now, there's an additional complication. As if that wasn't bad enough, the additional complication is that Kevin McKernan discovered a sequence of the simian virus 40, SV40 promoter. He discovered this sequence in the Pfizer vials in these DNA plasmids just in front of the spike protein sequence. Now, SV40, the simian virus 40, is an oncogenic virus that causes cancer in humans, and specifically it causes lymphomas and brain cancers, which are two of the top three cancers that I mentioned earlier, the turbo cancers that I'm seeing in COVID vaccinated patients. And there's been no explanation from Pfizer. Pfizer hasn't addressed why there is a sequence of this oncogenic virus, SV40 virus, why it's present in these DNA plasmids in their product, in their vaccine vials.
This is terrifying. I feel like I'm living a sci-fi horror film, except that it's not fiction. This is Joshua Getsko, who we spoke with about this DNA plasmid contamination, is going to be back tomorrow with Naomi Wolf to talk more about it. But the idea that I'm even using the word contamination within a product that was mass mandated on the entirety of the globe is really horrific. I mean, it's bad enough that anybody would choose to take something of their own, volition and end up getting a contaminated thing. But the idea that we mandated something that is this it's one of two things. Either there was absolute complete disregard for good manufacturing processes and quality control, or it's something more nefarious, and they purposefully contaminated these things. Either way you cut it, it's horrific. So the DNA piece, absolutely, as you've just laid out very clearly, could be contributing specifically to these cancers, and as you said, the lymphomas and the brain cancers. So the two other things that I had thrown out there, the toxicity of the lipid nanoparticles and the toxicity of the spike proteins themselves. Do you think, in your experience, that those could be contributing factors to the cancer rates?
There is a risk, and I just want to tie up the last point on this DNA contamination. I want to stress that this manufacturing process, Pfizer and Moderna have stated very clearly that they're going to continue using this manufacturing process for all COVID boosters and all future mRNA vaccines. And so now we've recently had, 2 weeks ago, we've had recommendations by FDA and Health Canada for these new COVID booster shots to be rolled out in children as young as 6 months old, in pregnant women at any stage of pregnancy, in young people, young adults of all ages. And these recommendations were pushed out just a few weeks ago. And so this is a very serious problem. I mean, these products should be immediately taken off the market. And what we see instead, we see the Nobel Prize awarded to, the two scientists who came up with some of these modifications that may be causing the immune system damage, like the pseudouridine modifications, which were invented by Dr. Carrico and Dr. Wiseman, that they've artificially modified the mRNA to put these pseudouridine sequences in that are, causing potentially damage to the immune system. So I just wanted to mention that this manufacturing, Pfizer and Moderna have not addressed this issue. They're going to continue the same manufacturing process with all the boosters and future vaccines. Now, the spike protein has toxicity. It interacts with tumor suppressor proteins like P53, like BRCA1, BRCA1, which is implicated in breast cancer and ovarian cancer. P53 is implicated in many cancers like colon cancer, lung cancer, hepatobiliary cancers. It seems to interact with these tumor suppressor proteins, and it seems to negatively impact them. So the spike protein itself causes problems wherever it is expressed in the body. It also seems to interfere with DNA repair. There was a paper that had come out showing that it interferes with DNA repair mechanisms. And again, if you mess with DNA repair, you increase your risk of cancer. So spike protein is very problematic. Now, the lipid nanoparticles themselves are problematic as well. So, I'm of the opinion that one day they'll try to rehabilitate this entire lipid nanoparticle mRNA platform and try to blame the spike protein for everything. And I don't believe that the spike protein is the cause of all the COVID vaccine injuries and deaths. It's the entire platform that's faulty. And the problem with the lipid nanoparticles is that they don't stay in the arm. They are immediately end up in the bloodstream, and they get delivered to the bone marrow. When they get delivered to the bone marrow, they're transfecting stem cells. They get delivered to various organs. They are processed in the liver. They're filtered through the hepatobiliary system. So now we're seeing aggressive cancers of the liver, of the gallbladder, of the pancreas, and the colon cancers. They get processed in the kidneys. You end up with aggressive kidney cancers. They end up in the heart. They end up in the brain. And, the lipid nanoparticles, they cross the placenta, so they end up in the fetus.
Right.
These are extremely dangerous products for pregnant women at all stages of pregnancy. In the first trimester, we see congenital malformations in babies and COVID-vaccinated women, malformations of the brain, heart, limbs. We see miscarriages. We see stillbirths. We see skyrocketing deaths of babies. When women get vaccinated in the second and third trimester, the fetus stops growing. The woman can go into premature labor. We see increased deaths during delivery. We see postpartum deaths, young mothers collapsing, dying after delivery. So the entire lipid nanoparticle platform is problematic. The lipid nanoparticles themselves are inflammatory and cause immune system issues. We don't know the extent of those issues yet. But just by the very fact that the lipid nanoparticles go systemic, and whatever protein you put in there, whatever mRNA you're putting in there, you are systemically delivering a foreign protein to the bone marrow, to the various organs where you get expression of this foreign protein, where you shouldn't get expression, and it causes all kinds of catastrophic complications. So I truly want to stress that it is the lipid nanoparticle mRNA platform that is highly problematic and should be halted, should be taken off the market, should be suspended until we get independent investigations of this platform.
I agree with you. I think while the spike proteins clearly are problematic, I think that not enough has been talked about with the lipid nanoparticles themselves. Drew and I did an entire show on lipid nanoparticles probably a year ago now. We have known for decades that they can cause great harm. People love the platform because there are lots of things that you can hide within or transport within a little globule called a lipid nanoparticle. And people have been working for decades. And how can we get different drugs to certain parts of the body by encapsulating them in this little fat globule? But we've also known of their high toxicity, particularly to the reproductive organs, as you said, to the bone marrow, lots of problems. And, the idea that this stuff did not stay in your deltoid muscle in your arm was well known. That was one of the great lies people were told, is that you're going to get injected in the arm and that this stuff is going to stay there. They knew darn well that wasn't the case, and it ends up in every major organ system in a matter of hours. And I think that the lipid nanoparticles are undoubtedly a big contributor to all of the various adverse events and certainly the cancers. I'm watching the clock wind down here. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in Canada. We were talking before we came on air, you and I, about what's happening. You would think, in light of this tsunami of evidence, and that's what it is, that you would have to be living under a rock to not know that there are problems out there. You would think that they would be backing off. What are you seeing actually happening in Canada with regard to mandates and where they're going with all of this?
When you look at what Health Canada and the public health officials like Dr. Theresa Tam are recommending, they are behaving as if there have been no injuries and no deaths from the COVID vaccines in the last almost 3 years now. They're putting out the recommendations in babies as young as 6 months old, and they're targeting the kids. And I can tell you, the age group 6 months to 4 years old, they're saying that they need to take 2 vaccines. They need to take 2 Moderna vaccines. And I believe for the Pfizer, it's 3 vaccines to be considered up to date on their vaccines. These are horrific recommendations. Again, blanket recommendation for pregnant women at any stage of pregnancy. No safety studies done on children or pregnant women, by the way, to back up those recommendations. But they're aggressively pushing forward. And one thing I want to mention is that they're changing the language. They're going away from the language of booster shot, and they're now renaming them to annual updated vaccines that, like a flu shot that you would get from your family doctor. And so they don't want the word booster, because booster implies that, the vaccine had failed, or that you need to continue boosting a product. Why do you need to continue boosting these vaccines if they were working, right? So
Right.
they want to move towards an annual model where you're just going to get your annual shot from your doctor. And I'm worried. I've read in the vaccine hesitancy literature where they really want to bring back vaccine mandates, but they want to do it through the family doctors. They want to make it so that you will not be able to visit your family doctor unless you have your updated COVID vaccines. And they'll make it mandatory for you to be able to even see your doctor. This is the way they're looking at bringing back quietly a type of vaccine mandate. So we have to be very careful about this. I'm pushing. I testified at the National Citizens Inquiry about the damages of the vaccine, the injuries, the deaths of Canadian doctors, which the Canadian Medical Association is covering up. We're almost at 200 sudden deaths of fully vaccinated Canadian doctors since the vaccines rolled out. The health authorities are covering this up. They don't want any talk about injuries. We have a broken vaccine adverse event reporting system in Canada. So VAERS is much better in the United States than the system we have in Canada, where doctors are not allowed to report vaccine injuries and deaths because they will lose their medical license, they will lose their job. There's been tremendous persecution of Canadian doctors who've been speaking out about the dangers of the vaccines. They're being silenced. They're losing their licenses. So just terrible corruption, when it comes to these products. But they are pushing ahead. They're pushing ahead as if nothing has happened in the last 3 years.
Well, that is unfortunately what we are seeing here in the United States as well. The CDC has no regulatory authority, but that said, they have tremendous power. The current recommendations here in the U.S. from the CDC is that children 6 months and older get the original 2-shot series. And then rather than the original booster, the bivalent booster, as you said, they now are calling it an updated vaccine, and it's now the monovalent one. But still, a child would need 3 of these shots to be considered fully vaccinated. And although the CDC doesn't make the rules about schools or travel or anything else, the reality is that schools and other municipalities use those guidelines, and they certainly, now that it is on the childhood vaccine schedule, schools and daycare centers will likely look at that and make a requirement that people have. So the CDC isn't doing it, but the reality is they end up having that ability to sway the public or sway regulation, because schools and other places will end up following what's on the childhood vaccine schedule. So in any event, we have wound down the clock. This is fascinating, terrifying and fascinating. Dr. Makis, I appreciate you continuing to bring it to us, to look at the data. I don't see this ending anytime soon. I think you've pointed out, and if people didn't hear it, that the cancer rates are worse in 2023 than they were in 2022, and that is the nature of cancer. When you see cellular changes and in the suppression of the immune system and the inability to recognize foreign cells or to fight them off, I fear we are likely going to see rates even higher in 2024. So again, I'd really like to bring you back in some weeks or months with an update. So keep us in the loop. And again, congratulations on your new stint at the Wellness Company. They're great friends.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. I appreciate you having me on.
We'll have you back soon. Thanks. Caleb, if you want to show, we'll take a quick look at the upcoming shows here, and I just swear to God, we're sort of in the swamp. I'm happy that we have Joshua Getzko and Naomi Wolf coming back tomorrow. We'll be talking. Obviously, Naomi has been proven right once again. The naysayers be damned. She continues to be on the right side of history. Dr. Jay is going to be with Drew on his own on the 5th, and then Rob Schneider, and then we've got our friend good friend, Dr. Peter McCullough, coming back on the 11th with updates on everything from cancers to just what he's seeing in general. He is, as everybody knows, been really a stellar spokesperson for this entire debacle from the beginning. And then my friend Michael Turner on the 18th, who's got a great story. He is a Washington State-based physician who was attacked mercilessly by the Board of Medicine there, and he went to great lengths to continue to treat people, early COVID treatment. He's a great patriot and somebody who's got a good story to tell. I think you'll really enjoy listening to him on the 18th. So with that, I will let you all go, and thanks for listening. I will see you, or Drew will see you with me tomorrow with Joshua Getzko and Naomi Wolf.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.
I have a question about this, Drew.
Yeah.
So how much do you think that they are trying to advance medicine in terms of like pharmacy options, like in terms of medication you can take, or how much are they just trying to like, well, we have Lexapro now, so let's push that and just deal with the side effects? Or are they trying to develop things without these side effects?
From the moment, this is how pharmaceutical research works. From the moment you pull a molecule off the shelf and identify it, you have 10 years to bring it to market and profit, and then you lose the patent. 10 years from the moment it comes off the shelf. On average, it takes 5 years and over $1 billion to bring a new drug to market. So they're left with 5 years to make their profit. Then it goes generic, and then it's pennies. So they only have 5 years with these drugs. So that's the only time they push them, is during those years when they can make profit. And when there are new things that seem to have new benefits and seem to be better than previous things, doctors use them, even though they get a little more costly. But they have to recoup around somewhere between $800 million and $1.5 billion, depending on the drug. That's why the pharmaceutical industry is such a mess, because it costs so much money to do the phase 3 trials and get things through the FDA. Now, the easiest thing to do is to take a drug you already have and change it a little bit and retest it for, you could do that in a couple of years. You can get it through the FDA very quickly. And that's why there's a million different Pepcid, Xanax, Tagamet. That's why there's a million different Protonix, Prilosec, Nexium, because they're called Me Too drugs. That's the most profitable way, because then you have 7 or 8 years to make your profits back. And usually it doesn't cost as much to get it to market. So that's why that happens.